Hello, my name is Eduardo Rivera. I am currently studying in my second year in the University of Puerto Rico, Recinto Universitario de Mayagüez. I am studying mechanical engineering, and for this project, for the class English 3236 Technical Report Writing, the final project consists of choosing an environmental issue that is affecting the island of Puerto Rico or certain sectors of the island and research possible solutions that could help reduce the effect of those problems or subsequently solve the problem. Now I will present some background information on the problem that I chose, which was the drought that affected the island during 2015. One problem was the record-breaking temperatures and lower rainfall than normal. The year 2015 for the island was one very dry. It broke many records for highest temperatures and for the lowest rainfall in certain months. One of these months was July, which saw only 4 centimeters of rain, the lowest in the island's history. Another issue that contributed to the drought in 2015 was the mismanagement of water supply. Throughout the island of Puerto Rico, there are many river basins that work as reservoirs to hold the island's water. And many of those river basins have not been funded enough or have not been provided the proper resources to fix these reservoirs and improve the capacity to hold water. This is due to the island's $74 billion economic debt. Due to this enormous debt that the island is currently facing, there is poor funding in order to fix these problems. Another major cause of the drought in 2015 was global warming. Global warming has been affecting the entire globe for many years now, and 2015 was not the exception. One of these major causes of global warming was the El Niño climatic phenomenon, which has impacted not just the Caribbean, but many nearby countries. Now, for those who may not know, the El Niño phenomenon is a warming of the tropical Pacific that affects global weather. It has led to quiet hurricane seasons, increased water temperatures along the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, and this disbalance of warm water as well as cold water through the ocean creates problems in the atmosphere. And a final cause to the drought in 2015 was pollution and contamination of water. Now, this may not be a direct cause to the drought, but this particular cause made the effects worse as they as due to the pollution and contamination of water during the drought, the island had to go into a state of water rationing in which its civilians had to go 1 day with water and from 48 to 72 hours without any water. The river basins and reservoirs were some filled with trash and pollution, this causing the water to be undrinkable. Therefore, it couldn't be provided to the civilians for their daily needs. Most recent drought situation in Puerto Rico. Now with this slide, my purpose is to present some events that occurred during this most recent drought. Now, the first bullet to present is the paucity of precipitation due to El Niño. A paucity is a lack thereof something. Well, during this past year, 2015, there was reduced rainfall throughout the entire island. Now, later on during the presentation, I will show a picture of a drought monitor during the month of August that shows just how low precipitation levels were during the month of August. Also during the drought, we presence abnormal amounts of dust and dry air over the southern Atlantic. The increased amount of dust coming from the Sahara Desert in Africa has caused many effects in the island and its civilians. Those civilians who have problems, have breathing conditions, they have been vastly impacted by this. But not just that, the amount of dust and dry air in the atmosphere causes climatic change, low rainfall, low hurricane seasons, and when hurricanes do develop, they are pushed away by this dry air. Also during the drought, we saw that about 20% of the island experienced extreme to exceptionally extreme drought conditions. And about 50%, from about 50 to 55% of Puerto Rico was affected by the unusual dry weather. This we can see later on in an infographic picture. Another effect of the drought was that school schedules were affected due to the fact that the water supply in the island was so low. Some schools, had to start later on. They were scheduled to begin classes 1 day, but due to the fact that there was no water for their students, they had to move back the starting date of class. This also not just affected the date in which class started, but to those schools that did start, their cafeterias, their bathrooms, all this was affected by the drought. Also, farmlands and agriculture took a negative impact. The agriculture sector in Puerto Rico took a very negative impact during the drought. Many animals, due to the fact that they could not drink water, and the fact that there was no rainfall to feed the plants that would feed the animals, such animals such as cows, pigs, and even chicken died as a consequence of there no being water. With this happening, prices rose in the products and meats that were hitting the market, therefore setting a chain of events that in the long run affected the citizens of Puerto Rico. Here are some possible solutions to the drought, some ways to prevent it or reduce the effect. And with each possible solution that I speak of, I will give some details on what it consists of. First, building desalination plants in strategical points around the island. Now, desalination is a process through which ocean water is pumped to a treatment facility where the salt is extracted through a process of reverse osmosis to make the water fit for domestic use. Now, later on, I will speak a little about the pros and cons of desalination, but due to the fact that Puerto Rico is surrounded by water, this could be a very viable option. Now, another option could be groundwater drilling. Now, groundwater drilling consists of drilling pockets of water that are located underground, just like you would drill oil in certain parts of the world. Underground, there are pockets of water that you could drill and remove this water. Now, this could be a very dangerous option due to the fact that some of these water pockets serve as a support to the ground that is above them, and removing this water could cause sinkholes and landslides that could affect and put in danger civilians. Now, another option could be fog catchers. Excuse me. Well, man-made fog catchers are basically massive nets that mimic the behavior of a certain insect called the Namib desert beetle. That catches fog, dense fog rolls, and they take the fog that they capture to create a layer of condensation that rolls into a shell and preserves water. Due to the fact that in some parts of Puerto Rico there is fog, this could be an option. Another option is wastewater recycling. Now, wastewater recycling at first, when you listen to it, it doesn't sound like the most appealing decision to make, but it could work in some cases. Now, water recycling, to give you a little background information, billions of gallons of untreated water are pumped out into the ocean each year. Now, what if we could find a way to treat this water and in some way recycle it for some of the basic uses of the home, such as, well, irrigation, toilet flushing, groundwater replenishment, etc. We don't necessarily would have to use this water for home use, but for some things we could use that water, therefore saving the clean drinkable water for other purposes such as showering and drinking, just like I just said. Now, another option is atmospheric water generation. Now, atmospheric water generation has been developed and may work in areas where climate is less conducive to fog and rainfall. Now, these systems rely on harvesting water from dew or humidity, and they process natural occurring water molecules from the air. Now, another option is geoengineering rain. Now, geoengineering rain, or cloud seeding in other words, is a technology that was developed in the 1940s and has been utilized before in California, which is a state that has been affected by the drought in recent years. Now, this technique sees silver iodide crystals dispersed across the top layer of clouds where they mimic ice crystals, giving water droplets more to cling onto and in turn boosting precipitation levels. And this could be used to either stimulate rain or stimulate snowfall. So in some areas this could be a very viable option. But taking all of these options into consideration and their pros and cons that have been previously analyzed, I came to the decision to present during my final project, which is the website that I'm going to speak about as a proposed solution, constructing desalination plants. Now here I'm going to speak about the pros and the cons that come with the construction of these plants. Now, the pros include that the method is proven and effective. Now, the method used for desalination is reverse osmosis, which removes salt from seawater. This method has been proven effective in creating fresh sources of drinking water that can deliver the health benefits people need. When properly designed, these plants can create millions and millions of gallons of drinkable water that is of high quality for citizens. Now, another pro is that the method is highly understood by science. Scientific data has been known to back up this process of osmosis, and it is highly understood. The technology used is very reliable, and it allows for high quality water, which allows us to obtain great results and could eliminate water shortage in many places such as Puerto Rico. Another pro of construction desalination plants is that it preserves the current fresh water supply in the island. The world is made up about 70% of water, and the other 30% is land. Now, out of that 70%, about 30% or 25% of that water is fresh water. So the fresh water supply is very limited. Now, with desalination obtaining all of its water from the ocean, the current fresh water supplies in the island would remain untouched, which comes to the next pro, which is that it uses ocean water as its main source. Now, the ocean, well, is very large, and due to the fact that the polar ice caps are melting, more and more water keeps being dumped into our oceans, and coastlines are being erased due to this large amount of water. So ocean water is basically an eternal supply that won't run out, or at least in the near future. Now, another pro of this is that it is not dependent on changing factor. For example, water reservoirs depend on the fact that they need rain or snowfall to be filled up. However, desalination does not rely on anything aside from the ocean. And finally, desalination plants are safely located. Desalination plants are located away from large residential areas, therefore. Even though they are large facilities and they are located in industrial zones, they will not put residential areas at risk. Now, even though these pros are very good, there are some cons that need to be taken into consideration. Now, its plants are very expensive to build. Building a desalination plant, even though I have not researched it yet, they have been presented to be expensive to build. Now, currently in San Diego, there is a $1 billion desalination plant that is being built to pump hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gallons of water from the ocean into reservoirs to then be treated and later be provided to civilians. Now, in Puerto Rico, we wouldn't need to build a $1 billion desalination plant, but due to the fact that we might need to build not just one plant, but maybe 2 or 3 around the island in strategical points, well, this could be costly. Now, going into this costly process, well, it takes 2 kilowatt hours of energy in order to produce 1 cubic meter of fresh water. Now, roughly this would translate to a cost of just under $2 on a lot of power grids, which is actually very costly. It's a very costly process, and it requires a lot of energy to process. More electricity and more energy is required to produce water from desalination than any other water supply or demand management options around the globe. Another con is that it contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. Now, currently the globe, as I previously mentioned, is going through a very rough stage in global warming and going green in various aspects with solar panels and wind turbines and hydropower. So greenhouse gas emissions are no good either. Now, these plants, they could produce high amounts of greenhouse gas emissions, which means that the process of removing salt can be very harmful to the environment and can have a negative impact on the air that we breathe, even though we are helping to fix the current water situation. So maybe we are doing good in one aspect, but we are also doing wrong in another. Now, for the next con, we're gonna talk a little about brine. Now, brine is the product of removing the salt from water. Now, one product is the clean water, and the other product is brine. Now, brine is so rich in salt and so in such a pure form of salt that it can contaminate any environment where it is placed. It is very strong and it can kill wildlife and vegetation. So this brine, it could be dumped back into the ocean to mix with the ocean salt water and then later be processed again, but would in the long run the amount of brine have accumulated so much that it affects the ocean water itself? That is a question that would need to be taken into consideration. This last point that I mentioned, well, contributes to the final con, which it might risk producing contaminated water. Now, this map represents river basins located around the island affected by the drought. The map presents us a legend that says D0 ampliamente seco, which means that it is dry. Now, the D1, which says sequía moderada, means that it is a moderate drought situation. D2, which is in a more orange color, says it is sequía severa, which is a severe drought situation. D3 says that is a extreme drought, sequía extrema. Now, if we look closely, we can see that La Cuenca Rio Grande de Loíza, or the river basin for Rio Grande de Loíza, was one of the areas that was in extreme drought during the year 2015. And a vast majority of the island was either in severe drought or moderate drought. And very few parts of the island could say that they were just during a dry season. This next map was the one I previously spoke about, was the drought monitor. Now, the drought monitor is for August 18, 2015, and we can clearly see that on the east part of the island, the conditions were in D3, extreme drought. The center of the island was more in D1, which was moderate drought, and the east was abnormally dry. Now, some research questions that we should take into consideration when researching this whole problem. Well, one is, what are the costs of building each desalination plant? Number two, what are the most beneficial and strategic points around the island to build them? Is this method worth the economic expensive due to the fact that Puerto Rico is facing a debt? Number four, could this bring future consequences to surrounding habitats or environments and the animals that live there? Number five, what is their individual and combined energy consumption? And finally, number six, what kinds of modifications or substitutions can be made to reduce their energy consumption? Now, as a conclusion, with the current economic debt situation ongoing in Puerto Rico, there have been few attempts to improve the water conserving method. There have been many causes to this whole drought, one of them being the economic debt that has not allowed for people to to for the government, excuse me, to to fund projects to clean reservoirs. Now, if this project is executed, it could help reduce the effects of a drought or even solve the problem. With a desalination plant, we could have a viable source of water for years to come by obtaining all of its water from the ocean. Thank you for listening to my presentation. This is Eduardo Rivera for English 3236.